Welcome into the Better Advertising with Better Media podcast. I'm here with Adam Malott. What's going on, Adam?
What's up, Justin? Episode 3. Great to be here.
Here to pick up the DSP series from last time. Here to talk about creatives and messaging and how we align that messaging with different parts of the funnel. Doing this podcast a little different than we normally do. Usually it's over a screen, but this time you're out here in Phoenix, Arizona, hence the Scottsdale name. So it's good to do this here in person, but let's dive into it, man. Let's talk on where we picked up or where we left off last time, which was talking about the creatives.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just bring everyone up to speed. What creative options are available within DSP for any advertiser?
Sure. So we have audio creative at this point, video creative at this point. But what I think we should focus on here is the creative that most advertisers are generally rolling out for their brands. And that's going to be the responsive e-commerce creative or essentially the Amazon default creative, if you will.
Yeah. That one's actually recently undergone some changes. It's under a new name now. It's called the component-based creative, but others that have been around DSP for a little bit longer probably remember that as the REC creative or the responsive e-commerce creative.
Mm-hmm.
So just a simple name change, but it still functions the same. It links to a product detail page on Amazon, sources your main image from your detail page, and pulls in the ratings, reviews for that standard looking Amazon creative. And again, that's kind of the bread and butter behind DSP. It's what we typically see the most success behind. And I think a lot of other advertisers see the most success behind. But again, that's one form of the creative possibilities within DSP. So within DSP, let's stick there, or
Sure.
rather, let's stick within display. Outside of the REC, the component-based creatives, what are the other options for people that may be non-endemic sellers?
Sure. So this is where we like to focus in terms of the power of DSP, right? So you have link in campaigns or link in creatives, right? That's driving traffic to Amazon. And with DSP, right, you can also link out, meaning if I wanted to send traffic from Amazon to an external website, I can do that directly through what was once called responsive e-commerce creative.
Yeah, we can now obviously put tags into our website so we can make sure, as we mentioned in the last episode, we're building audiences on our own page. But if you're linking to those pages as well, we can do that through the standard display creative in DSP.
Standard display creative. I really got to get that into the head.
So it's all these name changes, man. They're making it hard on us here. But so those are going to be the bread and butter, I think, behind any DSP advertiser is the custom, I'll say custom creative, because you're able to change the headline copy. Again, even if you're doing a creative that links to your product detail page, you can still add a custom image there. So it's not just you have to be a non-endemic seller driving to your own website to use a custom creative. You can still do that as an Amazon seller using DSP. But some caveats to that is we typically see the best performance on some of the Amazon native looking ads that typically look like standard display. There's some trust behind the Amazon name. There's trust behind that Prime badging and the ratings and reviews. So definitely lean into that. That's not something we should shy away from just because we can use custom creatives, right?
Sure. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Justin, in that Amazon customers are comfortable with that sort of Amazon, creative aspect or setup, if you will, right? So when they see that native DSP creative, a lot of times we see a greater click-through rate. We see a little bit better of a conversion rate or, just generally a more successful campaign when we really lean into those RECs or those classic default Amazon creatives, if you will.
Yeah, and really using those custom creatives, and I'm meaning that in the sense of adding in your own images, is really great when you have really solid images to begin with. I would not recommend anyone go out to try to build their custom creatives just to fill that gap within DSP. If you have great assets already, that would maybe be a conversation to start trying those. But again, those are even best served off Amazon, where you're trying to catch someone's attention to draw them into either your own website or, again, your product detail page, using those custom creatives that are a bit more eye-catching than the standard Amazon display. Right.
Beautifully said. I think there's another conversation to be had in terms of how we think about creative setup per section of marketing funnel, right? I'm going to not divulge into this subject too deeply, but, there is something to be said about how we would, display our messaging for a top of search or a top of funnel creative, one that's designed to funnel new to brand customers to PDPs versus, hitting somebody with a remarketing ad who's purchased a product 6 months ago and may need a reminder or something like that. So there are some caveats there I do want to call out.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later in terms of how we tailor that messaging, as we said earlier, according to different stages of the funnel. So, coming into that a little bit later on. But outside of just the display, let's get into some of those other creatives. We mentioned OLV or video
Hmm.
as one option.
Sure.
Anything to say on that other than, I mean, again, similar to like custom images, it's a great way to, be a scroll stopping ad,
Yep.
get someone into the destination URL, whether that's a product detail page or whether that's your own website. Videos are great at capturing the shopper's attention, right? But
Sure.
anything else to add on OLV there?
There's a lot of, I wouldn't say confusion, but if you ask an advertiser, hey, just, describe to me the difference in STV and OLV, it's tough, like not to put on, if you're not doing it on paper, right? And I was at Amazon in Seattle about 6 months ago, listening to a presentation, and one of their speakers had put it beautifully. He said, OLV, think of OLV as a static creative, just a standard Amazon DSP creative, but swap it with a video.
Mhm.
That is OLV in a nutshell. And that definition has stuck in my mind since.
Yeah, I mean, streaming TV and your OLV is going to have very different placements. Streaming TV is going to be on Freevee, or eventually we'll get into Prime Video. Self-service, I believe, is
Mhm.
coming down the line. But those OLVs are going to be really pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll on sites like IMDb or Amazon owned and operated properties. So it is unique placements, it is unique inventory and incremental reach outside of just streaming TV. So,
Sure.
and to your point, if you are running DSP already and you're not using OLV, I would take those best performing line items and, like you said, duplicate those out. Try those with a video instead and
Right.
see what the performance is in terms of click-through rate, detail page view rate.
Sure.
See how much more engaging those ads are.
I lean into this quite a bit. Maybe a redundant talking point, but with video, right, the human eye is naturally attracted to motion. And there is something to be said about, displaying motion in an advertisement and ultimately attracting attention that way. So I will say, the first 3 to 5 seconds of a video creative is very important for overall performance of that specific campaign. But absolutely test it. If you're seeing solid results on the static side, throw a video in there and see what happens. I think results can be surprising.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all know how much of a headache it can be to have 50 characters to try to sell your product. So you have much more than that, right, in a video, and able to show the lifestyle, the product benefits, the use, how to use it, the proper way to use it.
Sure.
So yeah, video can just do so much more than your standard display. So recommend trying that if you haven't already, and you have some great performing line items that you'd like to try something new on.
Sure.
So rounding out on the creative types that we're pretty familiar with here is also audio. So we've all heard an audio ad, right? Like whether you listen to podcasts on Amazon or anywhere else, there's typically audio ads anywhere. So we can now run those on Amazon owned and operated properties. And again, we're following the Amazon shopper. So we're not just blasting out podcast ads to random listeners or shoppers. This is very tailored people and where they're listening to podcasts and shows. So what's really cool about that is the interactive abilities we can add in those too.
Right.
So let's talk on those. We can basically add in a call to action in any of those audio ads. So at the end of that commercial, we'll call it, someone can ask Amazon or Alexa in this case, to add the product to their cart, or send me more info to my device, or remind me about this later today if you're in the middle of, prepping your kids' lunch for school. So it's a really great, it's an awareness play, right? It's far reaching. It's not a high purchase intent, but it's a great way to insert yourself into the Amazon shopper's day.
Right. I think of classic advertising, or just the history of advertising, and those little jingles that I'm sure you've heard on the radio when you were a kid, or you watched on TV and can still remember. Trust the Midas touch, right? There is something to be said about standing alone in terms of an audio strategy, right? That's something that we in full transparency have not dove into at a great length or tested rigorously, but I think there's going to be some really great opportunity in DSP to expand audio across a lot of good brands.
Yeah, I'm very excited to do that, especially if you work with great, honestly, spokespeople or influencers, right? They can be great advocates for your brand. If you can get a 30-second, 15-second recorded bit from one of your best influencers to recommend your product or how it benefits their life, that can go a long way. If they have a trusted following,
It's a great call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that about covers it in terms of the creatives that are available within DSP and what we'd recommend getting started with. But as we talked about earlier, let's get into the messaging and how we tailor the headline copy, those 50 characters, to different stages of the funnel
Sure.
and speaking to shoppers along their buyer journey. So, um, just to level the playing field, we, as I said earlier, have about 50 characters, or exactly 50 characters, that we can put into a custom headline copy within DSP. So exactly what you're doing on sponsored display, the exact same parameters, and typically the same rules, right? Like you can't have random capitalizations, you can't
Right.
have unsubstantiated claims about your product. So those same rules and parameters still apply to DSP. But again, within custom image, we've seen subscribe and save messaging be approved. So
Right.
not to say disregard the rules, but I would definitely recommend anybody, if you have a creative you want to try running, submit it, see if it gets approved. And then try applying it to a line item and seeing if that line item gets approved with that creative. So it's a test and see philosophy, but again, I would not recommend putting unsubstantiated claims or anything like that. But before we get into the messaging on how we tailor it to each stage of the funnel, anything to add on just basics around headline copy and recommendations there, Adam?
Sure. The only other thing I would add would be, messaging around savings. Make sure that is tailored around the date in which your deal is running. Amazon has been very, very specific in that you cannot advertise cost savings directly in ad copy if I believe the flight dates in DSP's instance are not set for that specific date.
Yeah.
So you absolutely need to make sure that your messaging is in line with the deals in which you're running. And that's a great way to support the deal in which you're running as well, which we could dive into in a whole other episode.
Yeah, with Prime Day looming around the corner, I'm sure a lot of people listening here have their deals already planned out. So a great way that DSP can magnify that reach, highlight your deals.
Mhm.
But again, it takes some nuance. It takes some setting the flight dates according to your deal, right?
Yeah.
So more reason to talk to DSP experts if you're not already doing this, but are interested in learning more. So
Sure.
let's get into a little bit more about, again, how we tailor that messaging, the headline copy, according to different stages of the funnel. So Adam, what would your best recommendation be for someone tailoring their headline copy to someone that's going more awareness focused versus more remarketing focused?
Sure. So there is a lot of comparison in how we tailor sponsored brand campaigns and ad copy there versus how I would tailor an awareness campaign in DSP, right? And the intent is to ultimately get your brand name out there. So let's include our brand name in the ad copy, right? Especially at top of funnel. And I would say always include, your I don't want to say flagship keyword, right? But top keyword, top converter, your top mover. You don't want to have any sort of second guessing when a potential customer sees an advertisement and maybe wants to know what that product is. How many times have you landed on a listing and didn't see a main keyword in a title, right? You need to be able to take a look at an ad and say, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to click on that.
Right.
So absolutely a top converter is another aspect I would include in ad copy.
Yeah. And I think that pretty much makes sense, hopefully, to anyone listening, is you want to build your brand name at the awareness level, hence why we're trying to build awareness.
Mhm.
So including that brand name, or if they're new to the aisle, a new to category customer, explain the benefits of your product to them. What impact is it going to make in their
Sure.
life? Why should they want to walk down your aisle if they haven't already started doing so? So to add to your point there about brand name, building awareness around your product and why they should have it in their life.
Sure.
And then, like you said, the main keyword that they're likely going to search for that product on when they're going ready to search and purchase, including that in your copy on DSP as well, reminding them of the best-selling massage gun or whatever your main keyword is going to be, I think is a great recommendation.
I think there's a way you need to think about this as well, is how do you differentiate yourself within your respective category, right? Let's say I'm from Pittsburgh, of course, I'm wearing a Steelers hat. Let's say I'm selling this Steelers hat on Amazon, right? And it's officially licensed, it's vintage, it's a beautiful hat, I would say. I would recommend there is, how would I differentiate this hat from the majority of the category? Well, it's officially licensed, it's vintage, right? Those are two great attractant keywords to include in ad copy, because that's an immediate differentiator between all of the other Steelers hats that are being sold on Amazon. So
yeah, I think distinguishing your brand, your product from others at the mid to upper funnels of the funnel
Mhm.
is a great way to start separating yourself and and building that customer journey in terms of why they should go with yours over another.
Sure.
Like you said, officially licensed, or if you have a patent behind your product, or if you're the official recovery partner of the NFL,
Sure.
claim that in your ad if you can support it. Again, don't want to say anything that's unsubstantiated, but if you have a real differentiator on your product, your brand, use that to your advantage, and DSP will allow you to do so.
I was talking with one of our account managers earlier today, and one of his managed brands had included the fact that they had gone viral with a specific product on TikTok. And they have included that in sponsored brand ad copy, which has driven a considerably higher click-through rate than just your standard, here's this product, here's this brand, right? So again, a differentiator within a pretty saturated and competitive category. But they're looking outside the box in terms of how can I expand and funnel customers, to my brand. And that's, we can rabbit hole on that subject in a different episode. But, I think there is something to be said about just trying to stand alone in a crowd.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties back into the influencer route we talked about too, where you're saying a substantiated claim. This brand went viral on TikTok,
Right.
But also, I mean, most people these days have TikTok, have seen those viral trends,
Right.
So it's banking on or backing on the influencer reputation of that product, and everywhere else you've probably seen it before. So
Sure.
great call out there. Well, I think that, short, sweet episode here today, talking about the creatives and the messaging recommendations on DSP. So please join us next time for episode 4 of the DSP series, and we'll chat then. Thank you guys so much.
It's always a pleasure, Justin. Until next time.